And welcome to Dana Digital Tutorials. Today we're going to look at how to remove the background in images. We're going to start with an easy image and we're going to work our way up to some images that are a little more complex. Let's get started. The first thing I want to say is that I use a Mac computer, and for many shortcuts I will mention Command, and I will attempt to also say Control for Windows users, but know that when I am using the button Command, if you're on a Windows, you will want to swap it for the Control button. When we're using Shift, it will be the same between the two computers. So let's get started. So I have this image of a cow, and you'll see he has a pretty plain background. So this would be a very straightforward image to take the background out of. But let's start by talking about setup before you take the background out of an image. Most of your AI images, when you download them, they are going to be flattened and you're going to have a locked background layer, and it will look like this. Sometimes if you're in, say, Kittl, you can click the little transparent background button. It's not going to get rid of the blue unless you've done that in Kittl, but it will put it on an unlocked layer when you open it, so it will already be ready to go. But in our case, we're going to have to unlock the button. The other thing we could do is we could leave that locked so that we know it's not going anywhere, which I do recommend, and we could hit Command or Control J and create a duplicate layer. We could have also done that by dragging this layer down to the plus button, and it would give us a duplicate layer. That way, if we really mess up, we can just go right back to the image below and start over. So I'm going to hide that image below so that it doesn't get in our way, but I'm going to leave it there. And we're going to be looking at how do we take this blue out. You have a couple of options. You could go and you could click the wand, which is W. It's also over here, and you'll see my panel looks a little different than before. All I did was I clicked this little arrow back and forth, so depending on the way you want to look at that, you can change it. I just thought I'd show you that. So if I hit wand, it's going to get me into my magic wand. Know that if you don't see a wand here, that means you may have been playing with some of your other options. And if I click and hold, I can see them and I can change between them. But I also can hold down the Shift key and hit W, and it will cycle through those different options. So we're going to stay on the magic wand. I could use this tool, but if I select here and I could hit the delete key, or I could hit Command or Control X, and it's going to get rid of it. So if you watch what happens, because I have this layer unlocked, it got rid of it. But what if I had done this on the layer below? So let's hide the top layer and let's look at the layer below. If I hit the delete key, it's going to ask me if I want to do content aware to delete the key, which I could hit yes. That's not what we want to do, so I'm going to hit escape. But if I hit the Command or Control X key, you're going to see that it turned the background, instead of transparent, to black. And the reason for that is when we have this last layer locked as a background layer, then it is not going to allow us to make transparent pixels. Instead, it's going to replace it with whatever color that I have over here. And then sometimes if you have that as white or black and that works with your image, that may be all you need to do. But in our case, we're trying to work with transparent backgrounds, so we would want to either create a duplicate layer like we've done here, or we would want to unlock this back panel. So I'm going to switch back and hide and show. Now, I'm going to undo that selection, and I'm going to talk about the different ways to select. If we're in our magic wand, you have to be in there to see these options, and we're going to go through them. If I wanted to work with the magic wand tool, the first thing I'm going to do is make sure it's off of new selection, which would take and create a new selection every time I click somewhere in the image. I'm going to put it to add selection. You can also get to that through shortcut keys, but I'm not going to do that today. Then you have your sample size, and if we click the drop down, and I do encourage you to click drop downs, look at what's there. That's how you're going to learn. But we have point sample, which is the default, and we have a 3 by 3 all the way up to a 101 by 101. And what are the differences? Well, the point sample is going to just select the pixel that we click on, and it's going to base its selection of color based on that one pixel until it gets to where another color stops it with the settings that we currently have. If I do a 3 by 3, it's going to say, okay, you're just kind of looking for these different blues, so I'm going to select any of the colors in a 3 pixel by 3 pixel area, and so on down to 101 by 101. I'm going to leave it on point sample. Your tolerance is going to see where you click, and then it's going to go and pick colors on either side of variation. So if I take this up to 200, it's going to pick a lot, whereas if I pick, say, 5, let's look at that. So if I pick 5 and I click in here, you can see that it's being very particular, and it's not selecting some of these areas that may have some other shadowing because it takes it away. And if I had it as a 1, it would pick even less. Whereas if I go to 200, you're going to see, let me undo that selection. You're going to see it's going to pick everything all the way up into that cow. So I'm going to undo that selection, get us back in the center, and now I'm going to change this to 40. I kind of like to start around 40 or a 20 and see where it goes. Now this anti-alias, I never mess with that, so you can just leave that checked. The contiguous button here is going to say, do I want it to search the entire image or just this section until it reaches another color to stop? So if we change the tolerance back to 200 and we uncheck the contiguous button, you're going to see it's going into that image and it's finding all the blue areas, and it looks like the edges of that black line does have some blue in it as well. So that is not what we want in this image. So we're going to check contiguous again, and we're going to change this back down to 40. Now, if I then go, I keep moving that around. So if I wanted to, then I could start clicking away with my magic wand, which we'll do in a minute. But another option I have is to not even look at these panels here and go straight to select subject. So if I select my subject, I can see that it has done a really good job. It's not 100%, but it's done a good job. I can come over and click the minus, and I can say don't select that area because I didn't want it to select the shadow, or maybe I did, and I would come back up to add and I would say you forgot to include this area. So then if I hit delete here, you're going to see it deletes my cow instead of my background. So what I would want to do if I'm doing select subject is I would want to go to select, and then I want to inverse my selections. There is a shortcut key, which is Shift, Command, or Control, and I. And now we have the background selected instead of the subject. So if I hit delete, let me hit delete again, it's going to delete the background. That is the areas that we switched to. Now, has it done everything we need it to do? How can we check? Well, an easy way to check that I have found is if you create a layer and you make it a color that is bright and vivid and not in your image. So in this case, we could make it, say, a bright pink or red or even orange. We'll go with red. And then we come in and we fill that layer. I'm going to make sure your marching ants are gone by deselecting everything, and I fill it, and then I drag it down to below. I can look and I can see where it might have deleted something that I didn't want it to delete. So it looks like possibly it selected this area, although that may have just been there, but I do know that it came in and I thought it had marching ants down here, but it looks like it didn't. So our cow looks really good, other than maybe some of these areas up here, and you can see the little whites. Corners can be an issue because they do bring in shadows or other corners. So if we hit E for erase, which is over here right above your paint bucket, we can come in, and I'm going to zoom in. The quickest way to zoom in for me is Command plus, probably Control plus for Mac users, and that way I can kind of see what I'm doing. And my brush, if I were to brush right now, I'm going to erase some of that black. I don't want to do that. So you can go up into your layers panel here and you can change the size of your brush. I find it is much easier if I put my brush where I want to paint, and then I use my open and close brackets to get it to the size that I want, and allows me to visualize the size of that brush. And then I'm just going to come in here and I'm going to erase. And you'll notice it didn't work, and that is because I was on the red layer. I need to switch back over to this layer, and then when I erase, I can erase this white area and just kind of perfect it a little bit for the customer. There's not a lot of areas. It's a pretty easy image. And I can just come in and get these little corners that are a little off. And you know, I'm not going to sit here and do it all, but you could play with that. Now that this image has all the backgrounds deleted, I am going to look at it, double check that I didn't miss, and I do see that, in fact, it did delete some areas that I didn't want it to delete. And that is down here in the tail. So I would have to go back and I would have to redo all of my selections, and I would have to start over because I've already deleted these pixels. But what if I want a better way? So if we go backwards, and we're going to go ahead and get back to our cow before we deleted him. And there it is. And I can see now that when I did the select subject or the wand tool, it came in here and it deleted. I believe we did select subject in this, and it thinks that that is not part of the wand tool. So I would say that this is probably not the best way to do it. And you can see we have some marching ants here, and we have some down here. And so I was thinking it was in the neck, but it was actually on the bottom part. So that's going to show through. And while it might not show in printing for these really tiny areas down here, it is going to cause problems if they're printing, say, on a sticker and it only prints those areas and they're trying to cut it out. So I'm probably not going to use the select subject here. I'm going to undo that, and I'm going to use my magic wand. But let's go ahead and create that red layer in the background first so I can watch what I'm doing. So if I do a wand tool, and I can see it selected everything because I did not click on the subject, and I do my wand. Now I can delete here like I did before, or press Command X, and it's going to take away that area. But if instead I do a mask, I'm going to have more control. And let me show you what I mean. So if I hit mask right here, it's going to hide the subject because it thinks I want to keep the area that I have selected. But if I undo that and I hold down the Option key and I hit the mask, you're going to see now it has nicely hidden the background. But if it had taken too much like it did before with the cow, let me get my blue back on there, my red back on there so you can see it. I would actually be able to paint it back in with this method rather than having to start over. So on a simple image like this, I would use this method, but on a more complex one, which you'll see in a few minutes, I would definitely use this method. So instead of painting on the photo to fix these little areas, we're just going to switch and we're going to paint on the mask. We want black to hide or white to show. So if you hit D, it's going to automatically fix your panel, which it is not doing for me right now. So if I come over and I just click the little swap, I'll be able to come up here and I'll be able to hit B for brush, which is also in this panel, use my brackets to get it down to the size that I want, and then I would just be able to paint. Now I haven't deleted anything because if I disable this mask, you're going to see it's all still there, which is nice because if I had done that select subject, and let me show you here, if it had done this like it did before, I would actually be able to swap over to the white and brush, And I would be able to just paint this area right back in because it's not gone. Once I have it the way I want, I can come in and right click on this mask and I can apply it. Now it's gone. I wouldn't be able to go in and mask areas back in, but it did the purpose that I needed it to do. I got my cow where I wanted. I had fixed all these little parts and I didn't want it anymore. So now it's gone. If I then am happy with my image and it's done everything I want, I'm going to go ahead and delete this layer. And I'm going to delete this back layer because I'm going to save this as a flattened, well, not flattened, I'm going to save this as a transparent PNG. So I would come in here and I would change this to PNG. And that is going to maintain that transparent background. If I were to save this as a JPEG, it is going to flatten. It will do basically this, and it's going to put a white background back into it. So that is not what you want to do to maintain that transparent background. So let's look at another image. We have a cow here, and we have a gray mottled background. We have two choices. We could completely delete that gray mottled background by making our tolerance high enough. The first thing we want to do, though, is we want to duplicate our layer, and then we want to go right below that layer, and we want to add that blank so we can see what we're doing, and we can fill it with red. So I'm hitting G, I'm filling it. You can see over here that I do have it. You just can't see it because it's completely hidden by the current layer. So if I select subject here, it's probably going to give me a little bit more of a hard time. And you can see it has. None of my flowers are selected. It's not even selecting all of the cow very well. So I am going to want to use my magic wand tool. I have it set on 40. So let's go ahead and select that area, and let's come in and hold down our option key and hit our mask. And you can see that when I did this method, it still got rid of a lot of my gray. So if I go back in, I undo that mask and I undo my selection and I change this to 20, you're going to see it's going to do a much better job. So option and mask, it's still getting rid of a lot of that gray, and I really don't like that. I would have to do the bottom the same as well. But I do have another option that I find a little bit easier. So let's undo that and let's unselect. I'm going to create another duplicate layer. We're going to do Command J. Now on one of these layers, it doesn't matter which one, I'm going to come in and I am going to select the gray area. And I want to make sure my contiguous is still on, and I am okay if it's 20. I think that will probably be okay. And I'm actually, you know what? I'm going to unselect the contiguous, and I'm going to tell it to just select these gray areas. It is okay that it's selected the cow. That's not a big deal. And I'm just going to tell it to show those gray areas, keep them. So I use my mask, and now if I hide this, you're going to see that it's selected the white and not the gray. So I need to redo that. So let's go in closer so I can make sure that I select a gray area. And I will pick right here. And now you can see that it's got these gray dots, but these ones back here that are a little bit more blurry, it doesn't have those. And so I'm probably going to change this to 40, not 71, 40. And I'm going to reselect one of these gray areas. Because I have the add to, I don't have to unselect. And now it's going to select more of those areas. So I had to do that a couple of times, but I got it to where I wanted. And now I'm going to mask. And you're going to see if we zoom out that I have a lot of crazy looking items here. And that's okay. So we're going to leave it that way. Then we're going to show our top layer here. And then we're going to use our mask tool to select the white. But this time we are going to select this area, and I don't want to do that. I don't want to delete my cow. So I want to have my contiguous on. We're going to select this area, and we're going to select this area. Now, if I mask to hide, which is hold down my option key, and hit enter, I'm going to purposely not hold my option key and show you what happens and show you how to fix it. I can actually go in and I can invert the mask. So if I go to image, and I go over here and I look for my adjustments and I look for invert, which is Command or Control I, then it automatically took everything that was black in the mask and made it white and vice versa. So now you can see here that we have a pretty good selection of the whites and the gray areas. So if I take this second layer off, you'll see why I did that. Because I was able to maintain all my little gray dots. But what I don't like, and why I like to use my mask tool, is I don't like how it deleted all of these areas. And because I haven't just deleted them, I've hidden them, I'm able to use my brush tool to bring those back. So let's hit B for brush, and let's come over here and let's start to paint some of these areas. And you'll see now that we can fix it, we can come in here and just adjust it, all the areas you want until you get it just the way you want. And I can even leave the top dots the way they are, or maybe I kind of want to create an area where I have white that includes those dots. But I want to show you what happens if you have a soft brush in this situation. So if you come up here and you change your hardness all the way down to 0, and I paint on this side, you're going to see my edge over here is a nice soft fuzzy, which is great if you're trying to darken an area or fade one thing into another, or all kinds of options. But in this case, my printer is not going to want that fuzzy edge. So make sure your brush is on harsh. There are shortcut keys you can look up if you don't want to have to go up into that panel all the time. But that is going to be what you want to make sure, is that you've got a hard brush. Once you've gotten this exactly where you want it, you can do the same as before with a little bit of adjustment. You can right click and apply these masks, but because we have two, if we just select both and we go to layer, merge layers, or Command or Control E, it's automatically going to delete them for you. And then we can just get rid of these back layers, and then we are ready to save. But I do recommend you take one little extra step before you're done, and you come in and change this background to white, just to see, and see it's not letting me do the clone stamp because apparently I clicked the clone stamp. So let's make sure it goes on G. I have a problem with my Mac, and I'll hit G and it doesn't always go there. So now I can see how if someone were to say print this on a white sublimation tumbler, how is it going to look? Do I have any harsh lines that I want to fix? And I can make further adjustments. I should have done this before I merged those other layers, but this is just an extra step that you can make sure everything is where you want. It's not necessary, but it does help, especially with more complex images. So let's go to the next one. We'll get this one all set up quickly. So I'm just going to Command J. Maybe I need 2 copies, maybe I don't. And I'm going to come in here and I'm going to fill this layer with a fun color. Maybe I'll use pink this time. And we are all set up. So the first thing I would do is I would select subject and I would see how it would do. I'm going to hide that layer. And then we're going to go up and make sure we're on our magic wand tool, which is W, and select subject. Now, it's done okay in some areas and not okay in other areas. What if I click this little drop down and I tell it to do a cloud instead of on my computer? It uses a little bit different technology. You're going to see different versions or selections. This time we didn't really see a whole lot of difference. When I did this before, it actually selected the cow perfectly and it selected all these flowers perfectly. But in this case, it's not doing it. So we're going to have to manually work with the magic wand. So let's undo our selection. But by the way, if we're working with a mask, we could start with what it gave us, and then we could use the magic wand to perfect it. So maybe we will do that. Let's go into select subject, and it's selected our subject. Because we've selected the subject and not the background, we can just press the mask and we're going to see our cow, but we can't really see what we want to select, so that doesn't help us very much. We could come in and kind of temporarily use this layer if we wanted to, bring it way down so that we can just kind of see where we're going to paint. We just want to make sure we're painting on our mask, and now I can see the areas. You also could use the quick mask, so if I hide this and I click the quick mask, well, that's not going to really show me either, but sometimes in some situations I don't use that a whole lot, so I'm not an expert on that. But I've now got kind of a faded area and I can see where I want to paint on my photo. So I could come in here and I could just paint this area. I don't feel like I need to get perfect around this cow, because I feel like some of this background would be good for me to use if I'm sending this out to the customer, and I would probably want my edges to end where the flower is. So let's get rid of this mask. I'm going to just delete them. I didn't mean to disable it. I'm going to delete it. And let's work with the wand tool instead. So if I hit wand, I can see that 40 is way too high. It's going into the cow. So if I change my tolerance down to 20, I can see if it's going to do a much better job. And remember, I have the add to selection, and I can see this is doing a pretty good job with most of my cow and my flowers. So I'm going to continue to come around here, and I'm going to click the areas, probably going to go into these areas. I may change my tolerance back and forth as I get into some of the little more iffy areas, but once I mostly have it selected, and remember we have the background selected, so you can invert your selection and then create a mask. Or you can come down here and hit the option key and create your mask, or you can make your mask and then invert your mask. So those are 3 ways, whatever you find the easiest. And as you can see, I'm going to have a lot more work. I should have used my magic wand tool to select more. I do have contiguous on because this would be a nightmare without it. Or I'm going to have to start using my paintbrush. What I would probably do is somewhere in between. I would continue to use my wand until it wasn't picking up or it was blurring more into the cow, like in these areas. And then I would use my brush on the mask to continue to get it perfect. But once I have my cow the way I want, and I've painted back in areas that I didn't want it to delete, and I've gotten rid of the areas that I wanted it to delete, I'm going to go ahead and merge these 2 layers, because I know now the mask disappears. I'm going to delete this pink layer, but actually remember I said we want to test it on a white layer, so let's do that. And I would want to see how that's going to print. And you can see here that I merged with that layer that we had semi-transparent, and I really should not have done that. So let's delete that layer. I just backed up. And let's apply this mask instead. And then let's change this pink to white, and you're going to see that's gone. And you can see all the areas that it's not selected with the limited wand that I used. But as you get in here and you keep selecting and you figure out the tolerances you need, get it to the best you like, and then work on your paintbrush. I hope this tutorial helps. And if you have any questions, put them down below and we will answer them. This is Dana with Dana Digital Tutorials. Have a great day.